Hello, and welcome to Starting Points, where one thing leads to another. I feel like I'm at some smorgasbord, and I don't know what to choose. I had so much I wanted to share with you, and I finally decided I'll order it and chronologically. So, except for the first book. This book, I didn't think about it until after I'd spoken about some of the agricultural way of life on the prairies of Canada. And then this book, oh yeah, I need to tell you about this one. So it's called Butter Down the Well, Reflections of a Canadian Childhood by Robert Collins. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful story. And at one point, talking about agriculture, Peter wasn't really, as a young lad, wasn't able to help with the plowing, wasn't able to help with the sowing, but he did help at harvest time and could stay home from school then to help. And it's just a wonderful account of that whole cooperative effort and various machinery that breaks down and is old, and new machines for different things, and that whole community camaraderie-ness. Now, going back in history, now I'll go back in history. When the first horses were brought, and I found information on that, Pedro de Mendoza in 1535 brought the first horses to the New World. And when some of these horses got free and took to the browsing and multiplying and spread, finally the First Nations people came in contact with them. And this is The Girl Who Loved Wild Horses by Paul Goebel. And I shared this with my students, as I did this, The Gift of the Sacred Dog by Paul Goebel, as I did Sky Dogs by Jane Yolen, artwork by Barry Mosher. Now, I didn't say who did the artwork for Paul Goebel because he did the artwork as well. So now, I wanted to get that sort of out there because how that helped in so many ways the life of the First Nations people, and what a strong bond was formed between the male riders of the horses and the work that they asked the horses to help to do. And also just in moving camp, hauling totem poles for the teepee. I was going to say totem poles. Now, there's another writer that I've shared with you before, Oliver, Amanda, and Grandmother Pig by Jean Van Leuven. And that's for like maybe 4-year-olds could hear this story. 5, 6-year-olds might be an early reading book for them. And but I didn't mention the great Christmas kidnapping caper. This is my children when they're about 9 or 10. Oh, they really enjoyed this story. Well, she wrote Bound for Oregon. Now, Bound for Oregon is a story which I'm looking here to see if I've got the name Mary Ellen. That's it, Mary Ellen. About Mary Ellen, who is with her family in these Conestoga wagons, making their way across the plains of North America. And she, Jean, acknowledges lots of the different sources that she used in this story, but she also acknowledged that what got her interested was that she found a little book called On to Oregon, a true story of a young girl's journey into the West. And she bases her story on this young person's recollections about her trip across. And she really just stumbled upon that and started fascinated by that, and that one thing led to another. Just like, maybe writing books for 5-year-olds and books for 10-year-olds and books for 13-year-olds and so on. One thing leads to another. Now, I want to share with you Beyond the Divide by Catherine Lasky. I've shared some other books by Catherine Lasky, and she is just an amazingly prolific writer. I actually looked her up on Wikipedia, where they list all the books she's done. Oh my goodness gracious! From books about people's biographies to things about animals to things about, and she, like Jean, was inspired by a book that she'd heard about, and she finds a copy of it and uses it to some extent in the writing of this book. I was and marked some places I was going to read to you, but I'm cutting that short. I'm just highly recommending this book, but I would say it's for 18 and up. And I was all kinds of things in there. Healing herbs are there. Bearing a fig tree over the winters in there. Her father's special growing plots, and eating to survive things like acorns, and finding them actually quite tasty, and so a change in her diet took place as well. But what a powerful story of hardship and people. Now, the prairie schooners were a fixture in those stories. For somewhere I wrote down the number of people that did this cross. Oh yeah, it's estimated that 1 in 10 immigrants died on the trail. Between 20,000 and 30,000 people between 1841 and 1884. Now, that was between 300,000 or 500,000 travelers who made that journey. The gold rush inspired many of them to pack up and go. And to pack up, many of them wanted to pack up everything they had, or that they felt they could certainly use. And you can't just do that with a horse-drawn wagon, or even a team of 2, or maybe a team of 4. They used oxen often. Now, not all the wagons were huge wagons, but these prairie schooners. I really like Glenn Rounds. He tells some amazingly funny and wild stories. I'll share with you at another point. But he's also researched he has like Catherine Lasky, has an interest in all kinds of things. And so this is a neat book. It's out in paperback, written and illustrated by Glenn Rounds. This book, you can't quite make out that first word there. It's Writing Freedom. And Pam Ryan heard about this story, and she researched it, and here's the book. It's an account of an orphan girl, and orphanage is not set up to care for and nurture young children. It's stiff, and it's harsh, and she finds solace with animals, in particular horses, and she finds she has a way with horses, which leads to her learning to ride, working in a livery stable, driving a stagecoach, and driving stagecoaches in California much later on. To get that job driving, she passes herself off as a lad, and called Charlie. And so when she gets to California, she stays on as Charlie then. And when the Civil War is over, and there's a presidential election, she gets in line to vote. This is 1868, and she's the first woman to vote in California, maybe the first woman to vote in the United States. There's some plaques for her, and that's how Pam hears about her. And but it's a neat story too. Now, back to the East Coast. This book's called Parnassus on Wheels by Christopher Morley. I had a friend tell me about this story, and I'm ever so glad. It was one of the greatest presents I think anybody ever gave me. No, I've had some good fortune. The story is about a man who loves books and wants to share them with other people. So he has a carriage, which is a caravan, just big enough for him to sleep in and cook in and all, and horse-drawn. And he makes a living going from, like, say, Pennsylvania down the coastline, in and about all the way down. He starts in the early fall, and so he's ahead of the winter, and he ends up spending the winter in the south and then heading back up. And he stops at farmhouses, people that he's met on previous trips. They welcome him. Not only does he bring books, but he brings news of the outside world, of neighbors and what's going on, and it's most welcome. And it's just a heartwarming story. I love the book, and I think in some ways I found it inspiring to me. Annie and Company. This is a story and pictures by David McPhail, and Annie puts on little performances, and she's got a wagon and a horse-drawn wagon, and so it's a funny, I was going to say sweet, picture book. Now, the last two books are definitely in this last century. 19 about 28. Let's see, I must have it somewhere. Cephaly, this ride, or Cephalles ride. He was born in Europe, educated in Europe, came and got a job as a professor in Buenos Aires in Argentina, which was quite a cosmopolitan place. But he's got an idea of riding up and over the Andes to early civilization sites, and up over the gets a ferry across the Panama Canal and up through Mexico and ends up in Washington, D.C., where he's received and welcomed. It took nearly 3 years, this journey of 10,000 miles. Very mountainous terrain through here, rough terrain. And I mentioned the thing about Europe in that he had two of those early stock, the Criolla horses, both for their company and in case anything should happen to one of them, as a backup. But they both survive, and he survives, and so they had some tight, some injuries and tight and close calls. I remember them crossing a bridge, a suspension bridge that over a deep chasm, and taking the horses and keeping them. It's quite a story. I was going to say he comes with a attitude, might be the word, toward the native people that he encounters along the way, the darker skinned people that he encounters, that I found difficult, but I knew it was part of a culture of that period of time, so this book is a personal account, and not to be outdone, it's done by a woman, and she is English, and it's called Saddleback Bags for Suitcases, and it's I just thought it. She sets out in 1938, having this idea of she will go from England to Vancouver, which is a very English city, and there she will get a pack horse, and she will ride that horse across Canada to Montreal. Well, what an adventure. And she's a wonderful, wonderful rider, very detailed and very, it was quite an adventure for her. When she gets to Montreal, she actually rides her horse down by Lake Champlain, through Vermont, Massachusetts, and down to New York City, where she is greeted by policemen on horseback, just as happened to Cephalles. He was greeted by police, mounted police in Washington, D.C., and she's horse is put up at the police quarters there for the horses, and then she heads back to England to take part in the Second World War. So quite a story. Well, thanks for joining me. Until next time, bye for now.